Have you ever had someone take credit for your work, only to watch karma catch up with them in the most unexpected way? Today's story is about betrayal, corporate backstabbing, and a twist of fate that nobody saw coming. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Rachel Martinez, and until last week, I was the lead developer at CoreTech Innovations, a Silicon Valley company that specialized in AI-driven healthcare solutions. I'd been working on Project Phoenix for 8 months, a revolutionary diagnostic algorithm that could predict early-stage diseases with 92% accuracy. It was my baby, my masterpiece, and I'd poured countless nights and weekends into perfecting it. The office was buzzing that Monday morning as I walked through the glass doors at 7:30 a.m., coffee in hand. Everyone knew today was the big day, the board presentation for Project Phoenix. I'd rehearsed my pitch 100 times, prepared every possible question, and had my slides organized down to the last pixel. Rachel! My colleague Mark Chen jogged over to my desk. Have you seen the email? The one about the Phoenix presentation? I frowned, pulling up my inbox. There it was, sent at 2:47 a.m. from CEO William Davidson's office. My stomach dropped as I read the first line. Due to recent strategic decisions, the Phoenix project presentation will be led by Veronica Davidson, effective immediately. Veronica Davidson, the CEO's daughter. The woman who'd joined the company 6 months ago with zero technical experience and a business degree from a second-tier university. She'd spent her days networking at fancy lunches and attending conferences while the rest of us actually built the technology that kept the company running. My hands shook as I continued reading. Ms. Martinez will be reassigned to junior development. Tasks under Veronica's supervision. Junior development tasks. After 5 years with the company, after leading 2 successful projects, after creating Project Phoenix from scratch, the click of designer heels on marble flooring announced Veronica's arrival. She breezed past my desk, not even glancing my way, heading straight to the executive elevator reserved for C-suite personnel. Her perfectly styled blonde hair caught the morning light, and her Chanel suit probably cost more than my monthly rent. I spent the next 2 hours in a daze, mechanically, sorting through lines of code I'd written a year ago. At 9:45 a.m., I was summoned to the executive conference room. Inside, the entire board was assembled, along with our biggest potential investors, pharmaceutical giants who'd been waiting for this presentation. Veronica stood at the head of the table, my presentation slides projected behind her. She wore the same confident smile I'd seen her practice in the mirror during our few interactions. Project Phoenix, she began, represents a breakthrough in predictive diagnostics. Over the past 8 months, my team and I have developed an algorithm that my team and I. The words echoed in my head as I watched her butcher the technical explanations I'd crafted. She stumbled over the difference between neural networks and deep learning. She called our data validation process a statistical system. When asked about the specifics of our accuracy rates, she glanced at her notes and gave numbers that were completely wrong. But the board didn't notice. They saw William Davidson's daughter, polished and prepared, and they saw dollar signs. By the time she finished, they were ready to greenlight the project for immediate development. After the presentation, I approached the CEO directly. Mr. Davidson, I need to speak with you about the Phoenix project. There are significant technical errors in what was just presented, and I believe, Ms. Martinez, he interrupted, not even looking up from his phone. Veronica has assured me that all technical aspects have been thoroughly reviewed. Perhaps you could focus on the junior tasks you've been assigned instead of questioning executive decisions. That afternoon, I found myself moved from my corner office to a cubicle in the junior developers section. My new responsibilities included debugging basic code errors and updating documentation for legacy systems, work I'd done 5 years ago as an intern. Veronica wasted no time establishing her authority. She implemented arbitrary changes to the Phoenix algorithm without consulting the original development team. She hired 3 expensive consultants who knew nothing about our specific systems. Worst of all, she began scheduling daily progress meetings where she'd question every line of code, despite not understanding the technical details. "Rachel," she said during one of these meetings, "I don't think this variable declaration is necessary. Can't we just define it inline?" "That would create a memory leak," I explained for the 4th time. "The garbage collector won't properly clean up the resources, and after extended runtime, the application will crash." She nodded slowly, clearly not comprehending. "Well, make it work without the variable declaration. I want cleaner code." I spent that night rewriting sections of the algorithm to accommodate her nonsensical demands, knowing it would introduce bugs that would take weeks to identify and fix. By Wednesday, the problems were already emerging. The QA team discovered the memory leaks I'd predicted. Performance tests showed the algorithm was now 15% slower. The training dataset, which I'd carefully curated over months, was being replaced with commercially available data that was significantly less relevant to our use case. Veronica's response to these issues was to schedule more meetings and hire another consultant, this time someone claiming to be an AI ethics specialist, who charged $500 an hour to lecture us about bias in algorithms while completely missing the technical failures we were facing. Meanwhile, news spread through the office grapevine about Veronica's extracurricular activities. She'd been spotted at the Grand Hotel's bar every night this week, often until 2 a.m., despite claiming to work late at the office. Whispers suggested she was sharing confidential company information with competitors in exchange for job offers. The breaking point came on Friday afternoon. I'd maintained detailed documentation of all my work on Project Phoenix, including a private version control repository where I'd backed up all the original code. When I tried to access it, I discovered my credentials had been revoked. Veronica. I confronted her in her newly acquired vice president's office. "I need access to the original Phoenix codebase. The current version is becoming unstable, and I need to verify that codebase is now proprietary information belonging to my division," she interrupted, not looking up from her laptop. "You don't have clearance anymore. I created that code. I wrote every line. I can fix the problems that are developing." "The only problem here is your attitude," she snapped. "If you can't adjust to your new role, maybe you should consider whether Cortec is the right fit for you anymore." That night, I went home to my small apartment in San Jose, opened a bottle of wine, and started making contingency plans. My savings weren't substantial. I'd been putting money into student loan payments and helping my elderly mother with her medical bills. But I began looking at job listings for the first time in 5 years. The weekend passed in a blur of job applications and updates to my portfolio. I avoided checking work email, knowing it would only frustrate me further. But on Sunday evening, unable to resist, I logged in to find an automated alert from our staging environment. "Critical error. Phoenix algorithm failure rate, 76%. My heart raced. The algorithm was failing 3 out of 4 times. This wasn't just a minor glitch. This would be catastrophic if it made it to production. I started to draft an urgent email to the CTO when another notification popped up. Veronica had scheduled a press conference for Monday morning to announce Project Phoenix's official launch. The Monday morning California sun felt different as I drove to work. News vans lined the street outside Cortex headquarters. Reporters and cameramen were setting up equipment on the sidewalk. The entire tech industry was watching. Inside, the lobby was filled with executives, investors, and media representatives. I made my way to my cubicle, my heart pounding with anticipation and dread. Around me, junior developers whispered about the potential bonus structure if Phoenix's launch was successful. Some had already started mentally spending their share of the expected windfall. At 9 a.m. sharp, William Davidson took the podium set up in the main lobby. Cameras clicked as he began speaking about innovation, about placing trust in the next generation, about his pride in his daughter's technical acumen. And now, I'd like to invite my daughter, Veronica Davidson, your new Chief Innovation Officer, to present Project Phoenix. Veronica glided to the podium in a burgundy power suit. She launched into her presentation with practiced charm, describing Phoenix as the future of healthcare diagnostics. Behind her, live demonstration screens showed the algorithm analyzing medical data in real time. For the first few minutes, everything seemed to proceed smoothly. Test results appeared on the screens, showing accurate predictions. The audience murmured appreciatively. Investors exchanged pleased glances. Then it happened. The main demonstration screen went dark for 3 seconds. When it came back on, random characters filled the display. Veronica kept talking, trying to maintain composure, but the system continued to malfunction visibly. As you can see, the algorithm's predictive capabilities are... She paused, noticing the gibberish on the screen. There seems to be a minor technical glitch. Let me refresh the demonstration. But the glitch wasn't minor. The system had crashed completely, displaying error messages that revealed the fundamental flaws in the modified codebase. Terms like null pointer exception and stack overflow were now being broadcast live to the tech world. The CTO, Henry Liu, rushed to the podium to assist, but every attempt to restart the system resulted in more error messages. In the background, I could see our QA lead frantically trying to roll back to a previous version, but even that had been corrupted by Veronica's changes. "Ladies and gentlemen," William Davidson interrupted, "we apologize for this temporary technical difficulty. Perhaps we could move to questions while our team resolves." A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. Mr. Davidson, a reporter from TechCrunch called out, "We've received reports that Project Phoenix's lead developer was recently demoted. Can you comment on whether this might have contributed to the system's instability?" Before anyone could respond, another reporter joined in. "Our sources also indicate that core functionality was removed from the algorithm against the original developer's advice." The questions kept coming. Someone had leaked information about the development chaos of the past week. As the press conference devolved into a disaster, I saw Veronica's face transform from confident to confused to utterly terrified. The aftermath was swift and brutal. By noon, Cortex stock had dropped 23%. Major investors were demanding emergency meetings. Pharmaceutical partners were threatening to withdraw funding. Employees were gathering in small groups, discussing their shock and disbelief. I was called to the executive conference room at 1:30 p.m. Inside, I found a solemn-faced William Davidson, the board members, and Henry Liu. "Ms. Martinez," Davidson began, his usual authoritative tone replaced by something approaching humility, "we need to discuss the immediate restoration of Project Phoenix. Henry has informed us of the extent of the changes made to your original code. We're prepared to offer you full reinstatement as lead developer with an immediate 30% raise and complete autonomy over the project." Before I could respond, there was a commotion in the hallway. Through the glass walls, I could see federal agents entering the building. 2 men in FBI jackets were approaching Veronica's office. "What's happening?" I asked. Henry cleared his throat. "It appears there's an investigation. Someone has been selling confidential information about Project Phoenix to competitors. The FBI has recordings from the Grand Hotel's bar." Everything clicked into place. Veronica's late-night work sessions, her cavalier attitude toward security protocols, the specific questions competitors had been asking about our algorithm. As I watched through the conference room window, Veronica was led out of her office in handcuffs. She caught my eye as she passed, her face a mixture of rage and humiliation. For the first time since I'd known her, She looked truly defeated. "Ms. Martinez," Davidson continued, drawing my attention back to the room, "we want to make this right. Not just for the company, but for you personally. The truth is, we failed you. Management failed you. And I failed you." The next few hours were a whirlwind. I was moved back to my corner office, expanded now to include a private coding lab. My original team was reassembled. We began the painstaking process of restoring Project Phoenix from my backup repositories. By 5 p.m., as the office buzzed with renewed energy and purpose, I found myself alone for the first time all day. I opened my laptop to a flood of messages. From LinkedIn, recruiters and executives from major tech companies who had witnessed the morning's debacle and wanted to make offers. But something had shifted. I thought about my mother, who taught me that integrity wasn't just about doing right when it was easy. It was about maintaining your principles when the world seemed determined to test them. I thought about the patients whose lives could be saved by Project Phoenix once it was properly implemented. I stayed. Over the next 72 hours, the tech world watched our recovery efforts. Media outlets ran stories about corporate nepotism and its consequences. Industry analysts published lengthy pieces on the importance of technical expertise in executive roles. Veronica's arrest made national headlines. The FBI investigation revealed she'd been selling information to 3 different competitors, receiving over $200,000 in payments in the past month alone. She faced federal charges including corporate espionage, securities fraud, and conspiracy. William Davidson resigned as CEO the following week, admitting that his blind spot regarding his daughter's capabilities had nearly destroyed the company. He'd spent 20 years building. In his resignation speech, he specifically mentioned to me, "Rachel Martinez represents everything this company should stand for: technical excellence, unwavering integrity, and the courage to speak truth to power, even when it's uncomfortable." The board appointed Henry Liu as interim CEO. His first official act was to create a new position, Chief Technology Advocate, with a mandate to ensure technical expertise informed all major decisions. He offered the role to me. I accepted. 2 months later, Project Phoenix launched successfully. The algorithm achieved 94% accuracy, even better than my original projections. It was being used in pilot programs at major hospitals, already detecting conditions that might have gone unnoticed for months. At the launch party, held at a rooftop venue overlooking the bay, I raised my glass to toast our team. As I looked out over the glittering lights of Silicon Valley, I thought about the twists and turns that had brought us here. Sometimes the universe has strange ways of correcting itself. Sometimes karma works faster than we expect. And sometimes, as I learned the hard way, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success achieved through unwavering commitment to what's right. That Monday morning when I thought I'd lost everything, I hadn't just lost my position or my project. I'd gained something far more valuable: the knowledge that my work had merit, my skills were irreplaceable, and my integrity was my greatest strength. The woman who'd tried to steal my project and destroy my career had indeed lost everything. But in the end, the real story wasn't about her downfall. It was about what emerged from that corporate rubble: a stronger company, a better system, and a technologist who'd proven that in the world of innovation, truth and talent will always, eventually, rise to the top. The Phoenix had truly risen, not just in name, but in spirit. And this time, the right person held the keys to its future. 3 months into my role as Chief Technology Advocate, CoreTech was experiencing what the tech press called the most dramatic corporate turnaround of the decade. But beneath the polished press releases and celebratory LinkedIn posts, tensions simmered within the company walls. The morning of October 15th began like any other, until I discovered an anonymous note slipped under my office door. "Some snakes shed their skin but keep the same venom. Watch your back." I showed it to Henry Liu, who'd already received similar warnings. Our new security measures had uncovered something disturbing: A network of employees who'd been loyal to the old regime, people who'd prospered under Veronica's brief but destructive reign. They resented the changes, the accountability, the expectation of actual competence. "We need to root this out," Henry said, examining the note. "But carefully, we can't afford another crisis." That afternoon, I received an encrypted email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line, "Phoenix has multiple heads." Against my better judgment, I clicked. The email contained what appeared to be fragments of code, specifically parts of Project Phoenix I'd never written. Someone had been developing a parallel version, possibly as a failsafe or a competing product. The encryption was sophisticated, military-grade. Whoever had access to this wasn't your average disgruntled employee. I called for an emergency meeting with my core team, Marcus Webb, our senior security architect, Lisa Park, our lead data scientist, and Thomas Reynolds, our systems integration specialist. These were people I'd worked with long before Veronica's arrival, people I trusted implicitly. "I need everyone's eyes on this," I said, pulling up the code on the main screen. "Does anyone recognize this architecture?" Lisa leaned forward, studying the patterns. Rachel, this is using quantum computational principles. We don't have the infrastructure for this." "Exactly," I said. "But someone thinks we do. Or someone thinks we should." The implications were staggering. If this code was real, it suggested someone had been secretly developing quantum-enhanced diagnostic capabilities, technology that would put Project Phoenix version 2.0 5 years ahead of schedule. That night, working late in my office, I received a call from an unregistered number. "Against protocol," I answered. "Ms. Martinez?" The voice was filtered, distorted. "I represent certain parties interested in Cortex future." "Who is this?" "Someone who understands the true value of Phoenix. Mr. Davidson's daughter was merely a distraction. The real threat to your work comes from within your own ranks." The line went dead. The following week, supply chain disruptions hit Cortec like a tsunami. Critical components for our medical devices were suddenly backlogged. Key vendors reported unexpected production issues. Testing laboratories began canceling contracts. Henry and I spent 72 hours straight in crisis management mode. Phone calls to suppliers revealed the same pattern. Someone had been accessing Cortex systems, using our vendor portals to place contradictory orders, creating confusion and chaos. "This is coordinated," I told the emergency board meeting. "Someone with deep systems knowledge is systematically dismantling our operations." During a late-night debugging session, I noticed something odd in our network logs. Thomas Reynolds, one of my most trusted team members, had been accessing systems far outside his normal responsibilities. When confronted, his explanation was vague, his usual confidence replaced by nervous fidgeting. "I was just doing some proactive security checks," he said. "You know, making sure we're protected." I wanted to believe him. Thomas had been with me through the worst days of Veronica's reign, but the evidence was mounting. 2 days later, our Quantum Computing Research Division, a small, secretive group working on next-generation diagnostic algorithms, reported that their primary research server had been completely wiped. All backups were corrupted. Years of theoretical work, gone, in an instant. The quantum team leader, Dr. Sarah Chen, was devastated. It was surgical. Someone knew exactly which files to target, which systems to compromise. This wasn't random vandalism. That evening, I stayed late again, poring over system logs, searching for patterns. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway, unusual for this time of night. Security protocols required badge access after 9 p.m. I dimmed my office lights and opened my door slightly. Thomas Reynolds was at Lisa Park's workstation, inserting what looked like a USB drive. I watched as he navigated to encrypted folders I didn't recognize. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, but I needed to understand the full scope of whatever was happening. I silently activated the recording function on my phone and watched. Thomas downloaded multiple files, then deleted something from Lisa's terminal. He was methodical, professional. This wasn't his first time. The next morning, I reported what I'd seen to Henry Liu. We agreed to set up surveillance protocols without alerting Thomas. Meanwhile, I needed to warn Lisa that her workstation had been compromised. "Lisa," I said, calling her into my office, "I need you to know that your terminal's been accessed after hours." Her reaction wasn't what I expected. Instead of shock or concern, she looked resigned, even guilty. "I know," she said quietly. "I've been monitoring access logs. I know about Thomas. I know about the quantum code fragments. And I know about what's really happening with Project Phoenix." "What are you talking about?" She closed the office door and activated the white noise generator, a precaution we used for sensitive discussions. Project Phoenix wasn't just about predictive diagnostics. The military potential was always there. Someone's been developing a weapons application. My blood ran cold. "Explain." "The algorithm we built can predict medical conditions with 94% accuracy. But with the right modifications, it can predict human behavior patterns with similar accuracy. Imagine knowing when and where social unrest will occur, or predicting enemy troop movements based on civilian behavior patterns. That's not what we created. It's not what you intended, but intentions mean nothing in the wrong hands." She pulled out her own laptop, showing me a completely different interface, one I'd never seen before. "This is what Thomas has been building, a parallel version of Phoenix, modified for military applications. He's been selling pieces to defense contractors while pretending to work on our diagnostic improvements. The betrayal hit like a physical. How long have you known?" 6 weeks. I discovered it accidentally when tracking a bug in our training datasets. I found connections to classified military contracts, dummy corporations, offshore bank accounts. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wasn't sure who else might be involved. I needed to gather evidence. I needed to be certain." We spent the next hour reviewing the evidence she'd quietly compiled. The scope of the operation was breathtaking. Thomas had been running a sophisticated scheme, using Cortex resources to develop military applications while maintaining his cover as a loyal senior engineer. But the deeper revelation was more disturbing. The quantum code fragments I'd received weren't from a benevolent whistleblower. They were bait, designed to draw my attention to theoretical future threats, while Thomas executed his plan with our current technology. "He knew you'd catch on eventually," Lisa explained. "He needed to discredit you before you discovered what he was really doing." That afternoon, we laid out our findings for Henry Liu. His face grew graver with each revelation. "We need federal involvement," he said finally. "This is beyond corporate malfeasance. This is national security." But notifying federal authorities meant potential delays in our medical applications. Lives could be lost while we dealt with investigations and bureaucracy. "There has to be another way," I said. "Can we isolate Thomas, contain the damage without alerting the broader investigation?" Henry's experience showed. "We have a board meeting tomorrow. I'll frame it as a routine security audit. Meanwhile, Rachel, I need you to keep doing exactly what you've been doing. We can't let him suspect that we know." That night, alone in my office, I reviewed every interaction I'd had with Thomas since joining Cortec. Looking back with new knowledge, the signs were obvious. His eagerness to access sensitive systems, his convenient absences during critical project phases, his subtle undermining of my authority while maintaining a facade of support. The next day's board meeting proceeded as planned. I presented quarterly progress reports while Henry orchestrated the background investigation. Around 3 p.m., as I was explaining our next phase of clinical trials, security guards quietly entered the conference room. Thomas Reynolds, the head of security, announced, "You're needed for immediate consultation on a security matter." I watched Thomas's face carefully. To his credit, he maintained composure. but I saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes. He knew this was the beginning of the end. The interrogation lasted 18 hours. Thomas initially claimed innocence, then tried to blame others. When confronted with Lisa's evidence, he finally broke. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he said. "This technology could save thousands of American lives. The military applications are inevitable. Someone's going to weaponize this. Better that it's us than our enemies." "That wasn't your decision to make," Henry responded. "You're naive. All of you. This is how the world works. Cortec will be stronger. America will be safer. I was protecting everyone's interests." The FBI arrived the next morning. Unlike Veronica's arrest, this was handled discreetly. No media, no spectacle. Thomas was led away quietly, and the official story spoke of procedural adjustments and personnel changes. But the damage to our team's morale was significant. These weren't distant executives or incompetent appointees. This was one of us. Someone we'd worked alongside, shared meals with, trusted with our most sensitive projects. I called an all-hands meeting 3 days later. Standing in the main auditorium, facing hundreds of faces marked by confusion and concern, I spoke without prepared notes. I cannot discuss the details of recent events. What I can tell you is this. Our work at Cortec matters. It matters enough that some will try to exploit it for purposes we never intended. Our response cannot be to stop innovating. Our response must be to build stronger safeguards, to remain vigilant, and to continue pushing forward with the mission that brought us here. The weeks that followed tested every skill I'd developed as a leader. We implemented new security protocols. Every major decision now required sign-off from multiple team members. We hired an independent security firm to audit our systems. But the biggest challenge was cultural. How do you rebuild trust when betrayal has come from within the inner circle? Found the answer in an unexpected place. Maria Rodriguez, one of our junior developers who'd been working on Phoenix's user interface, approached me with a proposal. "I want to start a mentorship program," she said. "Pair experienced developers with newer team members. If we're more connected, more transparent about our work, maybe we can prevent this kind of secrecy from taking root again." It was brilliant, in its simplicity. Within months, the Phoenix Mentorship Initiative had transformed our workplace culture. Senior developers who once guarded their knowledge jealously were now teaching others. Junior team members who'd felt isolated were becoming integral parts of our projects. 6 months after Thomas's arrest, new developments emerged in the investigation. Federal agents discovered that the military applications he'd been developing were already being used by foreign entities. Through a complex network of offshore companies, pieces of our technology had found their way to surveillance operations in authoritarian regimes. "We're looking at potential human rights violations," the FBI liaison told us. "Predictive policing. Algorithms based on your diagnostic models are being used to target dissidents before they act." The weight of this revelation sat heavily on all of us. We'd created something to save lives, and now it was being used to threaten them. The moral implications kept me awake for weeks. "We can't control how our work is used once it's stolen," Lisa said during one of our late-night strategy sessions. "But we can strengthen the good it does. For every way it might be misused, we can create 10 positive applications." She was right. We doubled down on our medical applications, opening our data sets to universities and research hospitals worldwide. We created an open-source version of basic diagnostic tools that smaller healthcare providers could adapt for their needs. But we also hardened our systems against future theft. We implemented quantum encryption for sensitive data. We created canary code, seemingly valuable but completely useless to anyone who might try to steal it, to track potential security breaches. The tech industry took notice. We began receiving requests for consultations from other companies worried about similar vulnerabilities. Cortec evolved from purely a medical technology company to a leader in secure development practices. 1 year after the Thomas Reynolds incident, I stood in our renovated headquarters for Project Phoenix 3.0's announcement. The algorithm now operated with 97% accuracy, and we'd added predictive capabilities for over 200 different conditions. But more importantly, it was housed in the most secure development environment in the industry. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the gathered crowd of healthcare professionals, investors, and media. We've learned that progress without security is an incomplete equation. Today, CoreTech announces not just an advancement in predictive medicine, but a new standard for responsible innovation. After the presentation, a familiar figure approached. Elizabeth Morgan, the reporter from TechCrunch who'd first brought attention to Veronica's technical failures, extended her hand. Ms. Martinez, the industry has been following your journey closely, from Project Phoenix's original crisis to this remarkable recovery. What would you say has been the most important lesson? I considered it carefully before responding. That integrity isn't just about individual actions. It's about building systems that amplify honesty and catch deception. We can't just hope that people will do the right thing. We have to create environments where the right thing is the easiest thing to do. As the event wound down and attendees mingled, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought me here. The betrayal by Thomas had hurt more deeply than Veronica's corporate maneuvering. Veronica was an outsider, ambitious but ultimately incompetent. Thomas was one of us, technically brilliant, culturally aligned, but ultimately corrupted by the possibilities he saw in our work. But from that betrayal, CoreTech had emerged stronger. We'd built a culture of transparency, a security framework that others envied, and perhaps most importantly, a community that looked out for each other. Late that night, alone in my office, I received an email from an anonymous account. My heart rate quickened, memories of Thomas's scheming still raw. But this message was different. Your work saved my mother's life. Phoenix detected her pancreatic cancer when it was still treatable. She's in remission now. Thank you for not giving up. I leaned back in my chair, watching the city lights blur through tears of relief and validation. Every late night, every confrontation, every moment of doubt had led to this, to lives being saved, to technology being used as it was meant to. The Phoenix had risen multiple times now, each iteration stronger than the last. And while I knew challenges would continue to arise, that's the nature of innovation, I also knew that CoreTech was now equipped to meet them. The snake hadn't changed its venom as that anonymous note had warned. But we'd learned to recognize the other serpents in our midst, to build defenses against them, and to cultivate an environment where trust could grow stronger than fear. As I prepared to leave for the night, I noticed a new post-it note on my monitor. The best revenge is building something so strong that betrayal becomes irrelevant. I smiled, recognizing Lisa's handwriting. She was right, as she so often was. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and undoubtedly, new tests of our resilience. But for the first time since joining CoreTech, I felt truly prepared. Not just as a technologist or a leader, but as someone who understood that the greatest innovations happen not just in code or algorithms, but in the communities we build and the trust we nurture. The journey that began with one CEO's daughter trying to destroy my career had transformed into something much larger. A testament to the power of perseverance, the importance of integrity, and the unshakable belief that technology, when handled responsibly, can change the world for the better. As I finally headed home, I thought about the quantum code fragments that had started this latest chapter. They remained a mystery, their true origin lost in the maze of corporate espionage and personal ambition. But perhaps that was fitting. In the end, it didn't matter where the threats originated. What mattered was how we responded, how we grew stronger, and how we continued to move forward. The Phoenix wasn't just a project name anymore. It had become the spirit of CoreTech itself, rising, learning, and transforming with each challenge. we faced. And this time, I was certain we'd built something too strong to burn. 2 years after Thomas Reynolds' arrest, CoreTech had positioned itself as the undisputed leader in medical AI technology. Our Phoenix platform was now operating in over 500 hospitals across the country, and the international licensing deals were transforming the company's financial trajectory. The tech world watched our every move, but none more intently than our former CEO's estranged daughter. The morning everything changed again started with a routine security briefing. Alexandra Alex Brooks, our new chief security officer, entered my corner office with a tablet displaying intercepted communications. "Rachel, you need to see this," Alex said, pulling up encrypted messages. "Veronica Davidson's prison correspondence has been flagged by federal monitors. She's writing to someone about the California incident and Project Phoenix." My stomach tightened. Prison hadn't silenced Veronica, merely redirected her focus. The recipient's identity is protected by lawyer-client privilege, Alex continued, but the pattern suggests she's coordinating something. Her appeals process has been moving unusually fast for corporate espionage charges. I studied the message fragments. Veronica's words carried weight I now recognized. Careful, calculated, manipulative. Prison had clearly sharpened rather than dulled her edge. "Double our monitoring protocols," I ordered. "If Veronica's planning something, we need to be 3 steps ahead." Later that week, during a global medical AI conference in Boston, I delivered the keynote address to an audience of 3,000 healthcare professionals. As I concluded my presentation on Phoenix's newest capabilities in early cancer detection, I noticed a familiar figure in the back row, William Davidson. The former CEO sat quietly, his presence unannounced, his face bearing the weight of his past mistakes. After the applause died down, he approached the stage. "Rachel," his voice carried the exhaustion of a man who'd lost everything worth losing. "I need to speak with you. It's about Veronica." We met privately in the hotel's executive suite. Davidson looked a decade older than when I'd last seen him. "She's using me," he began without preamble. "The authorities allow supervised correspondence between family members. She's been sending coded messages through me to someone outside. I've been too much of a fool to realize the pattern until now." He handed me copies of his incoming prison letters. On the surface, they appeared as desperate pleas from a daughter to her father. But buried within the text were technical references, system timing protocols, and what appeared to be security bypass methods for CoreTech's latest infrastructure. "I discovered this last week," Davidson continued. "I've been collecting evidence. There's someone inside CoreTech feeding information to Veronica, someone high enough to access classified development data." The revelation sent my mind racing. After Thomas Reynolds, we'd implemented stringent measures. "Thank you for bringing this," I said carefully. "We'll need to work with federal authorities to trace these communications." Davidson nodded. "I have one more thing to tell you. Yesterday, I received a visitor at my home in Palo Alto. A woman, mid-30s, claimed to be from a consulting firm interested in former tech executives' perspectives. She asked very specific questions about Project Phoenix's early development." "What kind of questions?" "About the original architecture before the modifications. About team members who might feel overlooked or underappreciated. About..." He paused, struggling with the words, "about you specifically. Your methods, your relationships within the company, potential vulnerabilities." I thanked Davidson and immediately called Henry Liu. We scheduled an emergency meeting with Alex Brooks and our executive team. The pieces were beginning to form a disturbing picture. Over the next 72 hours, our security team worked tirelessly to track digital footprints within our systems. Alex's team discovered sophisticated data exfiltration tools installed on multiple workstations, not amateur equipment, but military-grade software designed to avoid detection. "The pattern is elegant," Alex explained during our crisis meeting. Whoever's doing this understands our security measures intimately. They're using legitimate access privileges in ways that avoid triggering standard alerts. Narrow it down to upper management, Henry observed grimly. The psychological pressure was unlike anything we'd faced before. Every interaction became suspect. Executive meetings felt like poker games where everyone was hiding their hand. I found myself analyzing the micro-expressions of colleagues I'd known for years. 3 weeks later, the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Maria Rodriguez, now leading our mentorship program, noticed an anomaly during a routine system health check. "Look at these access patterns," she showed me during lunch. "Someone's been downloading historical project data consistently at odd hours. The timestamps correlate with Veronica's supervised letter-writing schedule. We brought in federal cyber forensics experts. Working overnight, they traced the access patterns to a series of USB devices that had been moving through the company like phantoms, copied, used, then destroyed, leaving minimal digital footprints. The sophistication suggested this wasn't a lone operator. Someone was orchestrating a coordinated effort to extract Cortex intellectual property while destabilizing the company from within. 4 days before the shareholder meeting, where we planned to announce our expansion into international markets, I received a priority call from Alex. "Rachel, we've identified a pattern. Every breach correlates with meetings attended by Catherine Wells." Catherine Wells, our Chief Operations Officer, a 2-decade veteran who'd been passed over for CEO when William Davidson brought in his daughter. She'd shown stoic support during our recovery, implementing efficient processes that streamlined our operations. "Impossible," was my first reaction. "Catherine's been nothing but supportive." "Check your calendar," Alex insisted. "Every major security incident aligns with her access to sensitive information." I pulled up my schedule. The evidence was circumstantial, but compelling. Every time Catherine had access to cutting-edge developments, information somehow found its way outside the company. That evening, I made a decision that would either solve our crisis or destroy the company's fragile trust structure. We set a trap. Working with federal authorities, we created false documentation about a Project Prometheus, a fictional quantum computing initiative supposedly building on Phoenix's architecture. We carefully engineered access privileges so Catherine would naturally encounter this information during her normal workflow. "If she's our leak," I explained to Henry and Alex, "she'll attempt to communicate this breakthrough to Veronica. If she's innocent, we owe her the biggest apology in corporate history." For 72 hours, we monitored every digital communication, every physical interaction Catherine had. Nothing. She went about her duties professionally, efficiently, betraying no unusual behavior. I was ready to abandon the operation when, on the third night, our monitoring equipment picked up something unusual. Catherine's home computer, supposedly disconnected from any Cortex networks, was transmitting encrypted data to an offshore server. The decryption key led us to a shocking discovery. The Project Prometheus documents were being reformatted and translated into Chinese, Korean, and Russian. But the most damning evidence was a detailed dossier on every Cortex employee, including personal vulnerabilities, financial pressures, and potential pressure points. FBI agents arrested Catherine Wells at her home at dawn. Simultaneously, raids occurred in 3 countries, dismantling what investigators called the most sophisticated corporate espionage ring in tech history. The interrogation revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. Catherine had been funneling information to multiple buyers, including foreign tech conglomerates and government entities. Veronica's involvement was real but limited. She'd been a figurehead, a convenient scapegoat, while Catherine orchestrated the primary operations. "I built this company," Catherine told investigators. 20 years of my life, watching that nepotistic amateur walk in and take credit for my work, then watching her fail and watching you rise." She looked directly at me through the observation glass. "You were the final insult. Everything I should have been. The aftermath sent shockwaves through the industry. Fortune magazine ran a cover story. When the mentor becomes the monster, the Catherine Wells betrayal. Cybersecurity firms cited our experience as a case study in the importance of behavioral analytics in threat detection. But the impact on Cortex internal culture was seismic. Catherine hadn't just stolen data. She'd carefully cultivated an image of wisdom and experience while systematically undermining us. The betrayal cut deeper than Thomas or Veronica because it came from someone we'd all looked up to as a company, Elder. At the emergency board meeting following Catherine's arrest, Henry Liu announced his resignation as CEO. "I allowed this to happen," he said. "I championed Catherine's promotion. The failure is ultimately mine." The board refused to accept his resignation, but the damage to leadership confidence was done. We needed to rebuild not just systems, but souls. I proposed a radical restructuring. Instead of traditional hierarchies, we'd implement a distributed trust system. No single person would have access to all critical systems. Every major decision would require sign-off from multiple stakeholders with complementary but independent verification processes. "We're not just protecting against bad actors," I explained to the company. "We're creating a culture where secrets can't survive because transparency is built into our foundation." 6 months into this new model, CoreTech had transformed. The distributed trust system proved unusually effective. Quality improved because more eyes evaluated every piece of work. Innovation accelerated because ideas cross-pollinated across departments. Most importantly, no single person could ever again hold the company hostage to their ambitions. But the greatest test came from an unexpected quarter. Veronica Davidson, serving her sentence at a minimum security facility in Northern California, had been approved for a work release program. Her assigned job? Teaching basic computer literacy to underprivileged high school students in Oakland? The irony of her situation wasn't lost on me. The woman who'd tried to steal technical glory now spent her days explaining to teenagers how to format Word documents. I initially feared this was another manipulation, another angle. Then I received a letter. "Dear Ms. Martinez, I'm writing not to ask for anything, but to tell you something I couldn't articulate while drowning in my own ego and insecurity. I see myself in some of these kids. They're smart, but overlooked. The system assumes they can't excel because of where they come from. I tried to cheat my way to success. They're trying to learn their way there." Yesterday, a girl named Destiny figured out a nested IF function on her own. Her eyes lit up like she'd discovered fire. I remembered that feeling, the pure joy of solving a puzzle. I'd forgotten it existed, beneath all my schemes and shortcuts. "You built something beautiful at CoreTech. Something I could have been part of if I'd had the humility to learn and the patience to earn my place. Instead, I tried to take what wasn't mine. I'm teaching now because telling students to believe in themselves rings hollow from someone who never believed in herself enough to do the work. Thank you for being everything I should have tried to become. Sincerely, Veronica Davidson." I showed the letter to Henry. He read it twice before speaking. "People change," he said simply. "Not always, not often, but when they do, acknowledgement matters." We discussed whether to respond. Eventually, I wrote back. "Dear Veronica, your letter reached me at a time when I needed to be reminded that people are more complex than their worst actions. We're all capable of growth. Keep teaching. Keep learning. Keep remembering that moment of joy when Destiny solved her problem. That's what technology should be, a tool for discovery, not a weapon for advantage." Rachel. The story of CoreTech's multiple betrayals became a legend in Silicon Valley. Business schools used our case studies to teach about corporate security, but also about resilience and the importance of building systems that transcend individual integrity. 2 years after Catherine's arrest, I stood once again in CoreTech's main auditorium. This time to announce our achievement of a seemingly impossible milestone: 0 security breaches in 24 consecutive months. Our distributed trust system had proven itself. Security isn't just about keeping bad people out, I told the assembled team. It's about creating an environment where everyone's contribution is valued, verified, and celebrated, where success comes from collaboration, not conspiracy. Later that day, I met with our summer intern program, bright college students excited about healthcare technology. As I looked at their eager faces, I saw echoes of my younger self, of Maria Rodriguez's early days, of the potential that exists in every person before they're tested by opportunity and temptation. One intern asked, "Ms. Martinez, how do you trust people after everything that happened here?" I answered honestly, "Trust isn't about believing people are inherently good or bad. It's about creating systems where their best instincts have room to flourish and their worst instincts have nowhere to hide. It's about building something so solid that individual failures can't destroy the foundation." That evening, as I prepared to leave the office, I found an envelope on my desk. Inside was a graduation announcement. Destiny Williams, the student from Veronica's class, had been accepted to MIT with a full scholarship in computer science. The accompanying note read, "Ms. Davidson told us about you, about how she tried to steal from someone who built something real. She said there are 2 paths in tech. You can take shortcuts that lead nowhere, or you can learn everything and build your own road. I want to build. Thank you for showing her what to teach us." I smiled, filed the announcement carefully in my drawer, and headed home to San Jose. The long arc of this story had bent toward something none of us expected: redemption, renewal, and the proof that even the most broken systems could be rebuilt stronger than before. Core tech continued to thrive. Project Phoenix evolved into a suite of diagnostic tools used worldwide. The security protocols we developed after the betrayals became industry standards. And somewhere in California, teenagers were learning to code from a teacher who'd learned the hard way that stolen success tastes bitter while earned achievement nourishes the soul. The CEO's daughter who'd tried to take everything from me had ultimately given me something invaluable: the determination to build not just a better technology company, but a better way of working altogether. One where trust was earned daily, not assumed, where success belonged to teams, not individuals, and where the best revenge against betrayal was building something too strong to break. As the sun set over Silicon Valley that night, I felt a profound sense of closure. The threat from within had been neutralized. The external challenges had been met. And the company I'd devoted my career to had emerged not just stronger, but better. A testament to the power of integrity in an industry often seduced by shortcuts. The Phoenix had risen again, but this time it wasn't just about recovery. It was about transcendence. And in that transformation, we'd all found something worth protecting. A future where technology served humanity's best interests, guided by people who'd learned to value character as highly as capability. The next chapter would bring its own challenges, as all chapters do. But for the first time since this journey began, I faced it knowing that we'd built something unshakable. Not just a company, but a culture. Not just a product, but a philosophy. Not just a recovery, but a revolution in how trust operates at the intersection of technology and human ambition, and that, more than any stock price or product launch, was our true victory. 3 years after the Catherine Wells incident, CoreTech had evolved beyond recognition. We'd gone public in what Bloomberg called the most oversubscribed tech IPO since Facebook. But on the morning of March 14th, my phone rang with news that threatened everything we'd built. "Rachel, it's Senator Patricia Moreland from the Health and Technology Committee," came the crisp Washington voice. "We need to discuss Phoenix. Congress is launching a full investigation into AI diagnostic systems. Your platform is at the center of scrutiny." The political landscape had shifted dramatically. What began as enthusiasm for healthcare innovation had soured into fear-mongering about AI replacing doctors. A coalition of insurance companies and traditional healthcare groups had launched a sophisticated campaign questioning the ethics and reliability of predictive diagnostics. Within days, subpoenas arrived. Congressional hearings were scheduled. The media, always hungry for a David versus Goliath narrative, seized on the story. Tech giant faces government investigation. Is AI medicine too powerful? The timing was devastating. We were weeks away from deploying Phoenix in rural America, an initiative that could bring advanced diagnostics to communities that hadn't seen a doctor in decades. Federal scrutiny now threatened to block what could be a healthcare revolution. For millions, I flew to Washington for preparatory meetings with our legal team. The lead attorney, Michelle Cheng, didn't sugarcoat the situation. They're painting you as a tech disruptor with no regard for medical ethics, she explained as we reviewed depositions. The fact that you're not a doctor is being weaponized. They're suggesting Phoenix is dangerous because it wasn't built by medical professionals. That's exactly wrong, I countered. We've collaborated with hundreds of physicians. Our platform supplements, not replaces, medical expertise. Logic doesn't always win in politics, Michelle warned. We need a different strategy. That night, alone in my Washington hotel room, I reviewed internal polling data. Support for Phoenix remained strong among younger populations and established tech communities. But among older demographics, the vast majority of congressional constituents, fear outweighed potential benefits. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Dr. James Harrison, a 73-year-old oncologist from West Virginia, reached out through back channels. His wife had been misdiagnosed by multiple specialists until Phoenix caught her early-stage melanoma during a routine screening test at a county fair health event. I've been practicing medicine for 50 years, Dr. Harrison told me over an encrypted video call. I've seen technology dismissed by my peers because they feared being replaced. But your system saved Ellen's life. I have documentation, testimonials from my colleagues. I'm willing to testify. Dr. Harrison became our unexpected champion. His credentials were unimpeachable. Former president of the American Medical Association. Published researcher, no ties to technology companies. When he spoke at grassroots town halls about Phoenix, credibility followed, but the forces aligned against us were formidable. Legacy health insurance companies had spent decades lobbying Congress. They saw predictive diagnostics as a threat to their business model. If diseases could be prevented or caught early, their profits would plummet. The day of my congressional testimony arrived. The cavernous hearing room was packed with cameras, journalists, and protesters. Signs read, "Humans not algorithms," and AI diagnosis, cure death sentence. Rep. Bradley Sullivan from Arizona led the inquisition. Ms. Martinez, your company profits from fear. You've created a system that tells healthy people they might be sick. How many unnecessary procedures have resulted from false positive Phoenix diagnoses? I'd prepared for this. False positives are a concern in any diagnostic tool, including traditional medical testing. Phoenix actually has a lower false positive rate than standard mammography. But more importantly, it catches conditions that would otherwise be missed entirely. You're not a doctor, Sullivan pressed. How can you defend making life and death diagnoses without medical training? This was the trap. I took a breath, remembering my strategy. Representative Sullivan, I don't make diagnoses. Phoenix doesn't make diagnoses. We provide data points that physicians use to make informed decisions. No patient receives Phoenix results without physician interpretation. The hearing stretched across 2 days. Hostile questions alternated with softball inquiries from representatives influenced by technology industry donations. The medical community was split. Younger doctors embraced innovation while older physicians feared obsolescence. During a recess, I overheard 2 lobbyists discussing their next move. One mentioned Operation Disrupt, apparently a coordinated effort to introduce state-level legislation banning AI diagnostic systems. If federal action stalled, they'd attack at 50 fronts simultaneously. That evening, I met covertly with Senator Moreland at an out-of-the-way restaurant. "Off the record," she said, ordering us both scotch. "You're fighting windmills. Insurance companies have deep pockets. Medical associations are divided. Public sentiment is manipulated. You need more than good technology. You need a political strategy." She outlined the harsh reality. Our best hope was to propose comprehensive regulation ourselves, establishing voluntary standards, creating oversight committees, implementing strict data privacy protocols. Show Congress we could self-regulate before they imposed restrictions. That would kill innovation entirely. We spent the next month drafting the Medical AI Transparency Act, our proactive response to legislative threats. The document outlined rigorous testing requirements, physician oversight protocols, patient consent processes, and a healthcare provider certification system for AI tools. As I prepared for my second congressional appearance, this one to present our proposal, I discovered something troubling. Someone had been anonymously distributing modified Phoenix diagnostic reports to media outlets. Results altered to show catastrophic failure rates and false cancer diagnosis. Our security team traced the digital fingerprints. The sophistication suggested professional manipulation, possibly state-sponsored. Foreign entities saw an opportunity to undermine American healthcare innovation while the U.S. was distracted by internal political theater. The revelation forced a calculated risk. During my second testimony, I presented evidence of foreign interference to a shocked committee. The narrative shifted instantly from big tech versus American values to protecting U.S. innovation from foreign threats. Representative Sullivan, previously hostile, became an unexpected ally. "Ms. Martinez, do you have evidence that Chinese intelligence services are attempting to discredit American medical AI systems?" "We do, Representative, and we've been cooperating with the FBI for the past 6 weeks to track these operations." Within days, patriotic fervor replaced fear-based opposition. Phoenix transformed from a corporate threat to a symbol of American technological leadership under attack. But winning the political battle revealed a deeper challenge. Cortech had become too valuable to too many interests. Being in the center of power politics meant constant maneuvering, endless compromise, and the reality that our medical mission had become entangled with national security concerns. The Medical AI Transparency Act passed with bipartisan support 8 months later. Phoenix received special designation as essential healthcare infrastructure, granting certain legal protections while imposing strict oversight requirements. Yet this victory came with strings attached. Government contracts followed. Defense. Department requests for Phoenix adaptations. Intelligence community interest in our predictive capabilities. We'd sought to heal bodies. Now various agencies wanted to predict behaviors. Established Cortech Aligned, a governance division dedicated solely to ethical AI development and use. Dr. Harrison joined as Senior Medical Ethics Advisor. Together, we navigated requests that tested our principles daily. When the Pentagon requested Phoenix modifications for military applications, we refused. When pharmaceutical companies wanted exclusive data access rights, we declined. When foreign governments offered billions for complete system licenses, we structured deals, ensuring proper medical use only. Each refusal cost us. Investors pressured for profit maximization. Wall Street analysts downgraded our stock. But our core team remained committed to the original mission, using technology for healing, not exploitation. The final test came when Chinese officials announced they'd developed their own version of Phoenix, claiming it was built entirely independently. Their system, unveiled at the Shanghai Medical AI Conference, bore suspicious similarities to our architecture. Rather than engage in public accusations, I took a different approach. I invited their lead scientist, Dr. Wei Chen, to Cortec for a Global Health Technology Summit. The invitation was both a diplomatic gesture and a strategic maneuver. By hosting the conversation on our terms, in front of medical professionals, worldwide we could advocate for open standards and ethical AI development. Dr. Chen arrived with a delegation of 50, including government officials, scientists, and observers. Over 3 days of technical sessions, we demonstrated Phoenix's capabilities while emphasizing our commitment to healthcare access and medical privacy. On the final day, I addressed both teams in the packed auditorium. Medical AI shouldn't be about national competition. Disease knows no borders. Our technologies should serve humanity collectively. Dr. Chen's response surprised everyone. We've studied Phoenix extensively. Your commitment to patient privacy and physician empowerment sets a standard. We propose a bilateral research agreement, sharing anonymized medical data to improve both systems globally. The announcement generated international headlines. Competitors became collaborators. National interests aligned with humanitarian goals. Phoenix expanded globally, adapting to different healthcare systems while maintaining ethical standards. 6 months later, the first international standards for medical AI were established, with Cortec and Dr. Chen's team as founding contributors. What began as theft and suspicion had evolved into cooperation and shared progress. Standing in our San Francisco headquarters, I watched the news feed showing Phoenix diagnostics being used in clinics from Mumbai to Mexico City. The system now processed anonymous data from 47 countries, continuously improving its accuracy while respecting local privacy laws and medical practices. But success brought new dilemmas. Requests poured in from authoritarian regimes seeking Phoenix for public health purposes that clearly included population control. We developed sophisticated filters to detect and reject applications that could enable discrimination or surveillance. One evening, after rejecting a particularly lucrative contract from a Middle Eastern government, Maria Rodriguez, now Chief Ethics Officer, found me still at the office. "You know," she said, setting down 2 cups of coffee, "when you were demoted all those years ago, who could have imagined we'd be making decisions that affect millions of lives across continents?" I smiled, remembering that initial betrayal that had set everything in motion. Veronica probably thought she was destroying my career. Instead, she forced me to fight for something bigger than personal success. Speaking of which, Maria pulled out her phone. "Look at this." She showed me a medical journal article, Early Detection Success in At-Risk Populations, authored by Dr. Veronica Davidson. The woman who'd once tried to steal Phoenix was now using her unique insights as a reformed offender to help develop targeted screening programs for incarcerated individuals. Her work focused on identifying high-risk populations that mainstream healthcare often overlooked. The irony was beautiful. The woman who'd once exploited systems was now helping to fix them. That night, I drafted one final message to Veronica, not as a response to her article, but as a full-circle acknowledgement. "Veronica, I've read your research on prison healthcare applications. Your perspective, seeing the connection between early intervention and reduced recidivism, brings insight only someone who's walked your path could provide. Destiny, your former student, graduated from MIT last week. She's joining Cortec's Social Impact Division. Full circle indeed. The path from betrayal to contribution is a difficult one. You've walked it with more grace than most would expect. Keep healing." Rachel. Cortec's story, from individual ambition and corporate sabotage to global cooperation and ethical leadership, had become a case study taught in business schools and medical ethics courses. We'd proven that American innovation could set global standards, that profit and purpose weren't mutually exclusive, and that former adversaries could become collaborators. The company had weathered multiple existential threats. It had survived internal betrayals, political scrutiny, international competition, and the constant pressure to compromise principles for profit. Each challenge had forced us to clarify our values and strengthen our resolve. Standing on the headquarters observation deck looking out over Silicon Valley, I reflected on how dramatically the landscape had changed, both literally and figuratively, since that morning 5 years ago when I'd been demoted to a cubicle. Thomas Reynolds remained in prison, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition. Catherine Wells had received a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation with international cybersecurity efforts. William Davidson led a quiet life consulting for nonprofits, having learned that legacy is built through service, not control. And me? I'd become something unexpected, not just a technology leader, but a voice for ethical innovation, a bridge between competing interests, and a guardian of medicine's technological future. CoreTech had transformed from a traditional tech company into something unprecedented, a public benefit corporation legally obligated to balance profit with purpose. Our charter now explicitly stated that healthcare benefits must be weighed equally with shareholder returns. The evening news played softly in my office. A story about Phoenix helping to identify a rare genetic condition in an infant, saving life through early detection. Another about our system's role in managing a developing pandemic in Southeast Asia. Then, a segment on the political debate about AI and healthcare, the same conversations we'd ignited years earlier. My assistant, Jennifer Chen, knocked softly. "Rachel, the call with the WHO is in 10 minutes. They want to discuss expanding Phoenix access to refugee camps." I nodded, gathering my notes. As I prepared for the call, I thought about how every challenge we'd faced had forced us to grow, not just as a company, but as humans learning to steward powerful technology responsibly. The call connected. Representatives from the World Health Organization outlined urgent healthcare needs in refugee populations. Phoenix could provide diagnostic capabilities where traditional medical infrastructure didn't exist. Lives could be saved. "We're fully committed," I told them. CoreTech will provide Phoenix systems at cost for humanitarian applications, but we'll need to ensure proper training for medical staff and establish data privacy protocols that protect vulnerable populations. After the call, I remained at my desk, watching the city lights come alive as darkness fell. Somewhere out there, former enemies were now allies. People who'd meant to destroy were now contributing to healing. And technology developed in Silicon Valley was saving lives across the globe. The lesson wasn't just about personal redemption or corporate resilience. It was about systems of trust, about building something bigger than any individual ambition or temporary setback. CoreTech's stock had soared to levels that made early employees wealthy beyond imagination. But at our all-hands meeting the next day, what generated the loudest applause wasn't our market valuation. It was the announcement that Phoenix had contributed to saving its millionth life. 1 million people walking around the planet who might not have been without our work. 1 million families spared devastating losses. 1 million proofs that technology, properly guided, could fulfill its highest purpose. As I filed out of the auditorium with my team, Maria nudged me. "Remember that first day you showed us how to debug the original algorithm? If someone had told us then, we'd have thought they were insane," I finished. But that's the thing about transformational journeys. They're impossible to imagine until you're living them. From cubicle to corner office, from betrayal to breakthrough, from local impact to global influence, the path had been neither straight nor predictable. Yet every twist, every setback, every moment of doubt had been essential. They'd forced us to question, to innovate, to collaborate, and ultimately to transcend the limitations we'd initially placed on possibility. The CEO's daughter who'd once threatened to take everything had inadvertently given me, and through me, countless others, the opportunity to create something transformative. Her attempt to steal had sparked a journey of building something unstealable, a legacy of innovation guided by integrity, a company culture that valued truth over territory, and technological advancement in service of humanity's greatest challenges. Walking. Out into the San Francisco evening, I smiled at the beautiful irony of it all. Sometimes the universe engineers our greatest challenges not to break us, but to reveal what we're truly capable of building when we refuse to break. Sometimes the betrayals that threaten to end our story are actually the beginning of a much larger narrative. And sometimes, if we're very fortunate, we get to live long enough to see justice transform into mercy, competition evolve into collaboration, and personal vendettas resolved into collective progress. The phoenix hadn't just risen, it had taken flight, carrying the hopes and healing of millions on its wings. And in that soaring trajectory, every trial endured and every principle upheld had found its purpose. As I headed home that night, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "This is Destiny Williams, MIT class of 2024. I start my first day at Cortec tomorrow. Ms. Davidson was right. The best revenge against those who doubt you is becoming undeniable. Thank you for building something worth joining." I smiled, typing back, "Welcome to the Phoenix family. The real work is just beginning." And indeed it was. But that's a story for tomorrow. Destiny Williams started at Cortec on a Monday morning in October. Her first day coincided with the announcement that would reshape our entire industry. Google had bought the largest hospital chain in America, with plans to roll out their competing AI diagnostic system, MedAI, within months. Rachel, Henry Liu, called from his office where the executive team was analyzing Google's strategic maneuver. "We need to address this immediately. Their system could completely undermine everything we've built." The concern was valid. Google's resources dwarfed ours. They could offer MedAI at a loss initially to capture market share, then raise prices once they'd eliminated competition. Their vast data troves from search and Gmail gave them insights into population health trends that even we couldn't match. But I knew panicking was the wrong response. We called an all-hands meeting to address the situation directly. Innovation doesn't bow to size, I told the assembled team. Google will compete on infrastructure and data volume. We'll compete on something they can't quickly replicate: trust, medical accuracy, and ethical deployment. Destiny Williams raised her hand during the Q&A session. The young MIT graduate spoke with poise that belied her age. "Respectfully, Ms. Martinez, shouldn't we acknowledge what Google's integration might teach us? They'll reveal user behavior patterns that could revolutionize preventive care if shared openly." Her question sparked an idea. What if instead of viewing Google as pure competition, we approached them about collaboration on standards? If we could establish industry-wide protocols for AI in healthcare, everyone would benefit, including patients. That evening, I drafted a letter to Sundar Pichai, Google's CEO. 3 weeks later, an encrypted message arrived. "Ms. Martinez, let's discuss the future of healthcare innovation. SP." The meeting took place at a private residence in Palo Alto, away from press scrutiny. Pichai was accompanied by 2 executives and Google's lead AI health researcher, Dr. Amir Patel. Cortec pioneered this space, Pichai acknowledged. "We've learned much from your ethical framework. But we believe scale matters in medicine. Billions of lives need these tools." I nodded. "Scale is important, but rapid deployment shouldn't sacrifice accuracy or privacy. If MedAI and Phoenix can establish compatible standards, we could leapfrog fragmented healthcare systems worldwide." Dr. Patel leaned forward. "Our data shows combining Google's behavioral analytics with your diagnostic algorithms could predict health crises before they manifest. But doing so raises ethical questions about privacy and consent." The conversation extended through dinner. We found unexpected alignment on core principles: patient autonomy, data protection, and preventing AI systems from making final treatment decisions without physician oversight. By midnight, we'd outlined a framework. CoreTech and Google would collaborate on a universal API standard for healthcare AI, allowing different systems to work together while maintaining competitive innovation on the platforms themselves. The public announcement came 2 months later. Rather than a zero-sum competition, MedAI and Phoenix would be compatible systems that could share anonymized insights to improve global health outcomes. Business media were skeptical. Silicon Valley giants claim cooperation amid obvious rivalry. But healthcare providers saw the benefit immediately. Clinics could choose Phoenix, MedAI, or both, based on their specific needs and resources. The real test came from an unexpected direction. China announced their Health Silk Road Initiative, AOE, massive investment in AI healthcare infrastructure across Southeast Asia and Africa. Their system, dubbed Dragon Health, was explicitly designed to lock recipient countries into Chinese technology ecosystems. The challenge wasn't just competitive, it was geopolitical. If China gained dominant influence in global healthcare, the implications for economic and security interests were enormous. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, I convened a private meeting with healthcare technology leaders from Europe, Japan, and Korea. Together, we proposed the Global Health Data Alliance, a framework ensuring that medical AI systems served humanity first, regardless of their country of origin. The political complexity was immense. Former president of CoreTech, William Davidson, now running his own Asian medical technology consultancy, offered unique insights into bridging cultural divides. "Rachel," he told me over secure video call, "China's approach in Southeast Asia isn't just about money, it's about respect. They're showing up in person, learning local needs, adapting their technology. If Phoenix wants global adoption, you need cultural finesse, not just technical superiority." His wisdom carried weight. We established CoreTech Cultural Bridge, a program pairing local healthcare professionals with our engineers during implementation phases. Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, each deployment was customized to local practices while maintaining global standards. 3 years into this new phase, CoreTech faced what seemed like its final test. A whistleblower from inside Google contacted Destiny Williams, now leading our security innovation team. The source, who used the codename Hippocrates, claimed MedAI was being adapted for Chinese military psychological operations, predicting population health to identify exploitable vulnerabilities in target demographics. Destiny brought the information directly to me. "Rachel, the implications are staggering. If AI can predict individual health vulnerabilities, those same algorithms can predict psychological ones." I immediately contacted Dr. Patel at Google. His shock appeared genuine. "This is exactly what we designed safeguards against. We need to investigate immediately." The joint investigation revealed a sophisticated operation. Chinese intelligence had cultivated insiders across multiple tech companies, slowly accumulating pieces of healthcare AI technologies. The goal wasn't to build a better medical system, it was to create powerful tools for information warfare. The discovery forced a reckoning across Silicon Valley. Profit couldn't be the only consideration when dealing with technologies that could influence human health and behavior at scale. CoreTech, Google, and several other companies formed the Consortium for Ethical AI Deployment, a self-regulating body with the power to audit and potentially ban technologies that could be weaponized. But this created a new dilemma. Who decides what constitutes acceptable use? Medical benefits for civilian populations were clear. Prevention tools for military personnel were arguably legitimate. The gray areas demanded wisdom beyond technical expertise. Dr. James Harrison, now 78 and still consulting for CoreTech, offered perspective. I've seen medical knowledge used to save and destroy. The differentiator isn't the science, it's the character of those wielding it. We established clear principles. Cortex technology would not be adapted for offensive military applications. Period. If this cost market share or contracts, so be it. Some lines couldn't be crossed. The Chinese government responded by accelerating their Dragon Health deployment. Countries in the global south faced a stark choice: align with American-led initiatives emphasizing privacy and consent, or accept Chinese systems offering immediate implementation and fewer questions asked. Africa became the battleground for these competing visions. CoreTech established the African Health AI Initiative, training local scientists and doctors to build and maintain their own diagnostic systems. Rather than imposing technology, we invested in capability building. The program's crown jewel was the Lagos Innovation Hub, where Nigerian engineers modified Phoenix architecture to address tropical diseases largely ignored by Western healthcare. Malaria prediction, yellow fever tracking, sickle cell management. Dr. Folek Adeyemi, who led the adaptation effort, presented results that stunned the medical community. By combining Cortex framework with ground-level epidemiological knowledge, we've reduced preventable deaths by 40% in our pilot regions. Her success inspired similar hubs in Nairobi, Cape Town, and Accra. The narrative shifted from tech colonialism to technology partnership. 5 years after Google's entry into the market, the landscape had transformed beyond recognition. Phoenix and MedAI weren't just diagnostic tools. They'd become platforms enabling medical innovations worldwide. From detecting heart rhythms through smartphone cameras to predicting autism risks in infancy, the technology's applications expanded daily. Yet success invited new scrutiny. Religious groups questioned playing God with predictive health. Libertarians feared mandatory health monitoring. Ethicists debated whether knowing one's future health risks was truly beneficial for all conditions. I found myself increasingly in philosophical discussions that moved beyond technology into fundamental questions about human agency, fate, and the right to an unknown future. The most challenging case came from a Buddhist monastery in Myanmar. Their leader, Youth Ondara, contacted us with an unusual request. Could we create a version of Phoenix that predicted optimal meditation outcomes without revealing specific health details? Knowing too much about the body's future interferes with spiritual practice, he explained. But if AI could guide practitioners to meditation techniques most beneficial for their current state, this aligns with our path. This request sparked months of debate within CoreTech. Could we ethically create a system that provided health benefits while deliberately obscuring detailed prognoses? Was this paternalistic or genuinely respectful of different cultural approaches to health? We developed what became known as the Mindful Health Module, an interface that offered recommendations without disease labels. Instead of high risk for diabetes, it might suggest energy balance practices recommended. Initial results from the monastery were remarkable. Meanwhile, Destiny Williams had risen to become Director of Advanced Research, leading projects that pushed the boundaries of what medical AI could achieve. Her team's breakthrough came in neural interface technology, the ability to detect early neurological decline through subtle changes in typing patterns and speech cadence. We can now predict Alzheimer's 5 years before clinical symptoms, she announced in a breakthrough presentation. But the question becomes, who gets this information? When? And how do we support people facing such knowledge? These weren't just technical challenges, but deeply human ones. I found myself spending as much time with philosophers, psychologists, and spiritual leaders as with scientists and engineers. The 10th anniversary of Cortex transformation approached. What had begun with a demoted engineer fighting to save, her project had evolved into a global network of innovation dedicated to human flourishing. Project Phoenix didn't just survive. It catalyzed a revolution in how humanity approached health, technology, and ethics. At the anniversary celebration, We gathered stakeholders from across the world. Former adversaries, current collaborators, and future leaders shared the stage. William Davidson, now considered a sage in Asian healthcare innovation. Veronica Davidson, whose prison health programs had reduced health disparities among incarcerated populations by 70%. Dr. Harrison, still sharp at 80, representing the bridge between traditional medicine and AI augmentation. But the most powerful speech came from a patient. Maria Santos, a 45-year-old teacher from the Philippines, spoke through translators. 5 years ago, Phoenix detected a rare blood condition during a routine screening at a community health fair. Without early intervention, doctors say I would have had months to live. Instead, I'm here today, healthy, watching my children grow. She paused, looking directly at me. Technology gave me this gift, but the human heart behind the technology is what makes it matter. As her words echoed through the auditorium, I thought about the winding path that brought us here. From stolen credit to global collaboration. From individual ambition to collective purpose. From the desire to prove myself to the recognition that our greatest achievements come from empowering others. The closing ceremony included a surprise announcement. The Nobel Committee had selected Cortech's ethical deployment framework for a special recognition in medicine, citing our work in demonstrating how technological advancement can serve humanitarian values on a global scale. Standing on the stage after the announcement, I looked out at faces representing every aspect of our journey. Destiny Williams, embodying the future we were building. Colleagues who'd weathered betrayals and emerged stronger. Partners who'd chosen collaboration over competition. Patients who'd found hope in prediction and prevention. The Nobel Committee's statement would later read, "Cortech has shown that in the 21st century, the greatest medical breakthroughs may come not just from laboratories and hospitals, but from the ethical frameworks guiding their application." That night, in my office overlooking the San Francisco Bay, I opened my laptop to find an email from an unknown address. The subject line, "From the original Phoenix." The message contained a single attachment, the first lines of code I'd written for Project Phoenix 5 years ago, preserved exactly as I'd created them before Veronica's interventions, before the betrayals, before the rebuilding. There was no note, no explanation. But I recognized the significance. Someone had saved the original work, protected it through all the chaos, and now returned it as a reminder of where we began. I opened a new document and began writing. To the next generation of innovators, you will face moments when your work is stolen, when your integrity is tested, when your vision seems impossible to achieve. In those moments, remember that setbacks are often setups for greater impact than you originally imagined. Build with purpose. Collaborate with humility. Lead with integrity. The technology you create may save lives you'll never meet in ways you can't predict. And when others question your right to transform the world, remind them that the only true qualification is the willingness to serve something larger than yourself. The future of healthcare and humanity depends not on what we know, but on how we use our knowledge for the betterment of all. That is the real legacy of Phoenix, not rising from ashes, but choosing daily to fly higher while keeping your feet grounded in human compassion. Signed, Rachel Martinez, founder and CEO, Cortech Industries former cubicle dweller, present-day possibility maker. Saved the document as phoenixorigins.md and added it to our digital archives, where future team members could discover it and understand that even our greatest technological achievements began with simple perseverance in the face of profound injustice. The city lights gleamed below as I prepared to leave the office. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, regulatory hearings in Brussels, prototype testing in rural India, discussions about quantum encryption for medical records. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment to appreciate how far we'd traveled from that initial betrayal to this pinnacle of purpose-driven innovation. The CEO's daughter, who once tried to take everything, had inadvertently catalyzed something neither of us could have imagined. A global movement proving that ethical technology, wielded by people committed to human dignity, could transform not just healthcare systems, but the very nature of how humanity approaches wellness, prevention, and the fundamental right to thrive. Walking to the elevator, I passed the original cubicle where this journey truly began. A plaque now marked the spot. Here, in 2019, Rachel Martinez was demoted to junior developer. Here began a revolution in medical AI ethics that would change the world. I smiled at the bronze inscription. Sometimes our greatest triumphs begin with our deepest defeats. Sometimes the universe conspires to place us exactly where we need to be to become who we're meant to become. The phoenix had indeed risen, and in rising, had taught the world that our greatest strength lies not in individual glory, but in lifting others as we climb, not in competition, but in collaboration, not in what we take, but in what we give. That was the true legacy of Cortec, a testament to the power of integrity, the importance of perseverance, and the beautiful truth that when we build for the good of all, we create something far greater than we could ever achieve alone. The elevator doors closed on what had been the most challenging and rewarding decade of my life. As I descended toward the parking garage, I thought about tomorrow's work meetings, the next breakthrough waiting to be discovered, the next life waiting to be saved. In the end, the best revenge wasn't just success. It was the transformation of pain into purpose, of betrayal into breakthrough, and of personal vindication into global healing. And somewhere in California, in a minimum security prison-turned-vocational training center, Veronica Davidson was teaching another group of young minds that the choice between taking shortcuts and building foundations would define not just their careers, but their character. We'd all learned, in our different ways, that the true measure of success isn't found in stock prices or headlines, but in the lives we touch, the systems we improve, and the next generation we inspire to build even higher. The phoenix hadn't just risen, it had taken flight, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of millions who dared to believe that technology and compassion, properly aligned, could indeed change the world for the better. And this time, unlike the mythical bird of legend, our phoenix wasn't destined to burn and return to ash. It was built to soar indefinitely, leaving a trail of healing, innovation, and ethical technology in its wake, a legacy that would continue long after any of us were gone. As I drove home through the quiet streets of San Jose, I smiled at the beautiful symmetry of it all. A story that began with stolen credit had ended with shared glory. A journey that started with corporate betrayal had culminated in global cooperation. A mission that commenced in a cubicle had expanded to encompass continents. The circle was complete. But the story? The story was just beginning. Tomorrow I will write its own chapters. And I couldn't wait to see what they held. The morning after completing what I believed was Cortec's culminating chapter, my phone rang. At 4:30 a.m., the number displayed unknown caller, but my security protocols identified it as originating from Zurich. "Ms. Martinez," the crisp Swiss-accented voice began, "this is Interpol agent Klaus Muller. We need to meet regarding Project Phoenix's unauthorized deployment by a rogue pharmaceutical consortium." My heart sank. After a decade of building ethical, medical technology, someone had weaponized our work in ways I'd never imagined. Within 72 hours, I was sitting across from Agent Muller in a secure conference room in Geneva. The evidence laid before me was chilling. A shadowy organization called MedPower Global had stolen Phoenix architecture through sophisticated cyber attacks on our European cloud servers. They weren't using it for military applications or state surveillance. They were running illegal clinical trials in developing nations without consent. They've already administered experimental treatments to over 10,000 subjects in sub-Saharan Africa, Mueller explained, showing satellite images of unmarked mobile clinics. Your diagnostic algorithms are being used to recruit patients with specific genetic profiles for unauthorized drug testing. The moral violation went beyond corporate espionage. They'd perverted our life-saving technology into a tool for exploitation, targeting vulnerable populations desperate for medical care. How extensive is the operation? I asked, reviewing documents showing shell companies registered across multiple jurisdictions. We estimate they've generated $2 billion in illicit pharmaceutical development revenue. The mastermind appears to be someone intimately familiar with Phoenix's architecture, possibly someone who previously worked with your technology. My mind raced through possibilities. The security breaches we'd weathered before had been resolved. Our former employees were extensively vetted. Unless… Agent Mueller, have you investigated Dr. Simon Blackwood? Mueller raised an eyebrow. The former Novartis executive who approached Cortec about licensing deals last year? The same. When we declined to provide exclusive access to certain patient datasets, he became persistent in legal challenges. Within weeks, the investigation confirmed our suspicions. Blackwood had orchestrated an elaborate scheme after we refused his initial advances. Unable to legally access Phoenix, he'd assembled a team of ex-intelligence operatives from various countries to execute what investigators called the most sophisticated pharmaceutical intellectual property theft in history. But stopping Blackwood presented unprecedented challenges. MedPower Global operated across jurisdictions where enforcement was weak. They'd infiltrated government health ministries, bribed local officials, and structured operations to technically comply with vague regulatory frameworks in each country. I assembled an emergency task force at Cortec. Rather than a purely legal response, we needed a technological counterstrike. Working with international law enforcement and tech giants who'd pledged support to our Global Health Alliance, we devised Operation Hippocratic Shield. Our strategy was multifaceted. First, we would release an advanced version of Phoenix with blockchain-verified origins, making it impossible to use stolen architecture without detection. Second, we'd deploy AI-powered monitoring to track unusual patterns in global pharmaceutical development that might signal illicit Phoenix applications. The third element was the most controversial. We would directly contact affected populations to offer legitimate medical care, essentially competing with MedPower's exploitation with genuine humanitarian aid. Destiny Williams led the technical implementation while I coordinated international partnerships. We moved faster than regulations could catch up, racing against the harm being caused daily. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A 16-year-old programmer named Ibrahim Suleiman from Lagos had been documenting MedPower's activities near his neighborhood. His grandmother had unknowingly participated in their trials, receiving experimental cardiac medication without proper informed consent. Using open-source intelligence techniques, Ibrahim had mapped MedPower's entire Nigerian operation, including secure facility locations, personnel movements, and even encrypted communication protocols. They use Phoenix's patient selection algorithms to identify people with rare genetic markers, Ibrahim demonstrated via video conference. But they've modified the code to prioritize those least likely to report problems: elderly without family, recent refugees, people with limited education. His findings provided law enforcement with actionable intelligence. Coordinated raids in 5 countries led to arrests of key MedPower operatives and the seizure of modified Phoenix systems. But the emotional toll on affected populations was devastating. Families learned loved ones had received untested medications. Communities discovered their trust had been betrayed by fake medical clinics. The psychological damage extended beyond physical harm. Cortec established the Medical Justice Fund, a $500 million initiative to provide comprehensive health care to everyone affected by MedPower's operations. We partnered with legitimate medical organizations to offer treatment, counseling, and follow-up care. The legal proceedings against MedPower dragged on for months. Dr. Blackwood, arrested in Monaco, claimed he was accelerating medical advancement by circumventing burdensome Western regulations. His defense painted him as a visionary pushing the boundaries of pharmaceutical development. During his trial, revealed testimony exposed the full extent of the exploitation. Experimental drugs with known severe side effects, trials conducted without control groups, data fabricated to show positive results, patients who died or suffered permanent damage whose records were destroyed. The prosecution's star witness was unexpected. Catherine Wells, now serving as a rehabilitation counselor, testified via video about her experience of rationalizing unethical actions. Her insights into corporate criminal psychology proved crucial in establishing patterns of intentional deception. 6 months after the initial Interpol contact, the global collaborative effort between law enforcement, tech companies, and healthcare organizations dismantled the entire MedPower operation. Blackwood received a 25-year sentence. Assets were frozen and redirected to victim compensation. But the incident exposed vulnerabilities in our global health technology framework. How could we prevent future bad actors from exploiting innovations meant to heal? I proposed the Zurich Accords at the World Health Organization Assembly, an international treaty specifically governing medical AI deployment. The framework included mandatory ethical review boards, real-time monitoring of clinical applications, and severe penalties for misuse of healthcare technology. The treaty's most innovative feature was the digital Hippocratic Oath, a binding commitment required from anyone working with medical AI systems. Like physicians swearing to do no harm, technologists would pledge to prioritize patient welfare above all other considerations. 2 years later, 147 countries signed the treaty. Medical AI development accelerated under clearer guidelines, fostering innovation while preventing exploitation. Yet success bred new visibility and responsibility. CoreTech had become too essential to global healthcare to operate as a private company. We faced pressure to restructure our governance model to reflect our societal impact. The board proposed an unprecedented transformation. CoreTech would become the world's first humanitarian technology consortium, a public-private hybrid where profits would be legally capped and excess revenue automatically directed to expanding global health access. The restructuring required board approval, shareholder consent, and navigating complex international regulations. Many advisors warned it would devalue the company and alienate investors focused on profit maximization. But during a shareholder meeting in San Francisco, I presented a different vision. CoreTech's true value isn't measured in stock price, but in lives improved. By codifying our humanitarian mission, we ensure this technology serves humanity's best interests permanently, regardless of who leads the company tomorrow. To everyone's surprise, shareholders voted 73% in favor. Major investment funds recognized that sustainable, purpose-driven companies outperformed pure profit seekers over the long term. The transformation attracted global attention. Bill Gates and other philanthropists offered strategic partnerships. Sovereign wealth funds from Norway and Singapore invested, aligning their capital with social impact metrics. Medical schools worldwide established CoreTech chairs in ethical AI, creating the next generation of purpose-driven technologists. 5 years after the restructuring, CoreTech's impact metrics exceeded all projections. Phoenix Systems operated in 85% of the world's hospitals. Mortality rates from early detectable diseases dropped 40% globally. The company's capped profit model ironically made it more valuable as a stable, mission-aligned investment. But personal challenges emerged alongside public successes. The decade of relentless work, constant vigilance against threats, and carrying responsibility for technology affecting millions had taken its toll. I found myself increasingly exhausted, wondering if it was time for new leadership to carry Phoenix forward. The decision crystallized during a quiet evening at Cortex Meditation Garden, a space designed for mental health after employee feedback about work stress. Sitting among the redwoods we'd planted to remember humility, I realized I'd spent 10 years defending and expanding a mission. Perhaps it was time to step back and let it grow independently. I announced my decision to transition to chairman role, with Destiny Williams rising to CEO. The succession planning had been deliberate. She embodied the perfect synthesis of technical brilliance, ethical grounding, and appreciation for the journey that had brought us here. At her inauguration, Destiny addressed the global CoreTech community. Rachel Martinez proved that stolen opportunities can become gifts to the world. Today, I inherit not just a company, but a movement. We will continue expanding healthcare access while pioneering protection against technology misuse. My new role allowed deeper focus on what I realized was our next frontier: mental and emotional well-being technology. If Phoenix could predict physical conditions, could similar algorithms detect early warning signs of psychological distress? Could we catch depression, PTSD, or suicidal ideation before crisis points? The field proved extraordinarily sensitive. Ethical concerns about privacy, autonomy, and the fine line between support and surveillance required careful navigation. We partnered with psychology researchers, patient advocacy groups, and philosophy departments to develop frameworks prioritizing dignity and consent. 3 years into this work, a breakthrough came from combining our medical AI with linguistic analysis of digital communications. The empath protocol could identify concerning behavioral patterns in consented participants, not reading content, but analyzing linguistic markers that professional therapists recognized as distress signals. Beta testing saved lives. College. Students flagged for support received timely intervention. Veterans demonstrated decreased crisis incidents when paired with empath monitoring. Elderly, isolated individuals connected to community resources before loneliness became critical. But darker applications beckoned. Insurance companies wanted access to predict mental health claims. Employers requested screening tools for hiring decisions. Law enforcement sought pre-crime psychological profiling. We established ironclad principles. Empath would operate solely with explicit consent for therapeutic purposes. Data would never be sold or shared with third parties. Individuals maintained complete control over their mental health profiles. On the 15th anniversary of my demotion, CoreTech organized a global celebration. Events occurred simultaneously in 50 cities, celebrating how far we'd advanced medical technology while maintaining ethical standards. The day brought messages from world leaders, testimonials from patients whose lives Phoenix had saved, and analyses from ethicists praising our approach to responsible innovation. But the most profound moment came when Veronica Davidson joined virtually from Wisconsin, where she now led a statewide prison health reform initiative. 15 years ago, I tried to take what didn't belong to me, she said to the celebration audience. Today, I dedicate my life to ensuring fair access to technology like Phoenix for everyone, especially those that society overlooks. Rachel, you proved that grace under pressure creates more change than grabbing for glory ever could. Later that night, in my home office overlooking the bay, I reviewed press coverage of the anniversary. Headlines celebrated CoreTech's journey from corporate scandal to global health leader. But what struck me was a sidebar in the Financial Times. Beyond profit, how purpose-driven tech companies are reshaping capitalism. The article traced our influence beyond healthcare. Other tech companies had adopted similar humanitarian hybrid structures. Venture capital firms now prioritized ethical scalability alongside profit potential. A new generation of entrepreneurs saw success through societal impact. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria Rodriguez, who'd recently been appointed to the United Nations Technology Ethics Council. Rachel, just landed in Geneva. Tomorrow's debate on global AI governance will heavily reference Cortex model. You changed how the world thinks about technology's responsibility to humanity. I smiled, realizing the real transformation wasn't just in what we'd built, but in how we'd shifted paradigms. The CEO's daughter, who once tried to steal credit, had unknowingly launched a revolution in values that extended far beyond healthcare technology. As I prepared for sleep, notifications continued arriving, from former colleagues, current employees, and people worldwide whose lives had been touched by our journey. Each message reinforced that our greatest achievement wasn't the technology itself, but the new understanding of what technology could become when guided by purpose rather than profit alone. The next morning brought news that would define our next chapter. A young researcher in Bangladesh had discovered a way to use Phoenix algorithms to predict climate change health impacts years in advance. Rising sea levels, changing disease patterns, resource scarcity, all could be modeled to prepare vulnerable populations. This convergence of health and environmental technology represented the frontier I'd been unconsciously moving toward. Cortex would pioneer planetary health intelligence, using AI to understand and address the interconnected crises threatening human well-being. As I reviewed the Bangladeshi researcher's proposal, I felt a familiar excitement, the same surge, that had driven me in that initial cubicle 15 years ago when I'd glimpsed Phoenix's potential. The circle had expanded beyond completion into an infinite spiral. Each revolution around purpose, ethics, and innovation brought new challenges requiring higher-order solutions. We'd proven that betrayal could catalyze transformation, that corporate ethics could scale globally, that technology's ultimate measure was its benefit to those who needed it most. Standing at my window, watching San Francisco awaken, I knew this chapter wasn't an ending, but an expansion. The lessons learned through trials by corporate fire now applied to humanity's greatest challenges: climate resilience, pandemic preparedness, equitable resource distribution, all required the same integration of brilliant technology and uncompromising ethics we'd fought to establish. The CEO's daughter had ultimately given all of us, something far more valuable than she'd tried to take. Her attempt to derail my career had set in motion forces that would reshape how humanity approaches its greatest challenges. And somewhere in that expanding future, I glimpsed the real meaning of revenge and redemption, not as opposites, but as partners in a dance leading toward justice, where every betrayal endured builds strength for greater service, and every wound received becomes wisdom for better healing. The Phoenix didn't just rise, it evolved. And in that evolution, humanity found a new path forward, guided by technology that had finally learned to serve rather than dominate, to heal rather than harm, to unite rather than divide. The story that began with stolen credit had become humanity's shared inheritance. And the woman who once tried to take everything had inadvertently given us the blueprint for transforming everything. One life, one breakthrough, one act of ethical courage at a time. As the sun climbed higher over the bay, I opened my laptop to read the Bangladeshi proposal more carefully. Tomorrow would begin another decade of challenges, innovations, and impacts. But now we faced them equipped with more than technology. We carried wisdom earned through trials, compassion forged in betrayal's fire, and the unshakable conviction that humanity's greatest problems required not just brilliant solutions, but better people to implement them. The next chapter was calling, and I couldn't wait to answer. 20 years had passed since Veronica Davidson first demoted me. On the morning of the anniversary, I received an invitation that would complete the circle in ways none of us could have imagined. The envelope arrived by private courier at my home office in Northern California. Inside, cream-colored paper bore elegant handwriting. You're invited to the Davidson Foundation's inaugural Global Health Innovation Award ceremony. This year's theme, Rising from Ashes, when betrayal becomes breakthrough. My first reaction was confusion. William Davidson had disappeared from public life years ago after selling his Palo Alto estate. The Davidson name hadn't appeared in tech circles since, but the invitation came with a handwritten note. Rachel, the time has come for a different kind of reconciliation. The truth about our family's legacy must finally be told. Please come. At age 52, I'd seen enough plot twists to be wary, yet curiosity overwhelmed caution. I accepted, planning to attend alone without an entourage or press team. The ceremony took place in a restored Victorian mansion in Pacific Heights. As I entered the wood-paneled library where the reception was held, familiar faces materialized from different chapters of my life. Henry Liu, now elderly but sharp-eyed; Maria Rodriguez, leading UNICEF's Global Health Technology Division; Destiny Williams, who had transformed CoreTech into a $100 billion humanitarian enterprise. But the greatest surprise was the host. Veronica Davidson appeared gracefully aged at 48, her earlier arrogance replaced by something harder to define. Not humility, exactly, but awareness. She wore a simple gray dress and minimal jewelry, a stark contrast to the designer power suits of 20 years past. "Thank you for coming," she said, clasping my hand. "I know this must feel strange." Before I could respond, she continued, "There are things you need to know about our family, about what really happened. My father built that company on stolen ideas, just as I later stole yours. The pattern spans generations." She led me to a private study where old documents spread across an antique desk told a darker story than any of us had known. William Davidson hadn't founded CoreTech through technological brilliance, but by systematically acquiring startup after startup, often through questionable means. The culture of theft and ambition I'd fought against had deep roots. When I tried to take Project Phoenix, I was following a family template, Veronica explained. Take credit for others' work. Acquire through aggression what couldn't be earned honestly. She paused, searching my face. But something unexpected happened. Your response, choosing to build rather than retaliate, broke that pattern. It inspired others to do the same, including me, eventually. The ceremony that followed wasn't about awards or celebration, but about culmination. The Davidson Foundation, secretly established by William Davidson before his death 6 months earlier, was being dissolved. Its entire endowment would be transferred to a new entity, the Global Technology Ethics Initiative. The surprise announcement drew gasps from attendees. $3.2 billion would fund technology ethics programs worldwide, focusing on mentorship, education, and preventing the misuse of innovation that had marked the Davidson legacy. But the evening's most significant revelation came in William Davidson's posthumous video message, played on screens throughout the mansion. The former CEO appeared frail but resolute. "I spent my career building an empire on other people's creativity. My daughter followed that same path until one person showed there was another way. Rachel Martinez proved that integrity creates more lasting value than theft ever could." He paused, gathering strength. "This foundation isn't about redemption. I don't deserve that. It's about taking responsibility for the culture of exploitation I perpetuated. It's about ensuring that brilliant minds like Rachel's are protected, not parasitized." The message ended with a confession that stunned everyone. "My greatest regret isn't business failures, but teaching my daughter to see success as something to be taken rather than created. Rachel, I'm sorry. Veronica, I'm sorry. To everyone harmed by our actions, use this resource to build better." As the video ended, Veronica addressed the room. 20 years ago, I tried to steal Project Phoenix. Instead, I learned that the real value wasn't in the technology, but in the character that created it. She turned to me. "Rachel, you've consistently chosen the harder path, the path that benefited everyone rather than just yourself. Today, I'm asking you to lead this foundation's first initiative, creating global standards to prevent the kind of exploitation my family perpetuated. The request caught me unprepared. Leading Cortex transition to humanitarian work had been challenging enough, but accepting Davidson funds felt complicated. "I need time to consider this," I responded carefully. The next day, I assembled my closest advisors. Destiny Williams offered perspective. "Rachel, you've spent 2 decades proving that stolen opportunities can become gifts to the world. This invitation to transform the Davidson legacy feels complete." Maria Rodriguez disagreed. "Their money is tainted. Can you really build something pure from a foundation of theft?" The philosophical debate continued for weeks. Ultimately, my decision crystallized during a conversation with my mother, now 82, but still sharp as ever. "Mija," she said in her kitchen, where years ago she'd encouraged me to maintain integrity above all else. "Healing sometimes means working with those who once hurt us. Turn that money into medicine for the world." I accepted the leadership role, with conditions: complete transparency, diverse governance, and a mandate to actively work against the very business practices the Davidsons had employed. The Global Technology Ethics Initiative launched 6 months later. Our first major project, the Integrity Innovation Fund, providing resources to whistleblowers who exposed corporate misconduct and protecting inventors whose work was being stolen through corporate espionage. But our most impactful work emerged in unexpected ways. We discovered patterns of technological exploitation in industries far beyond healthcare. Energy companies suppressing breakthrough renewable technologies. Agricultural corporations sabotaging small farmers' innovations. Media. Conglomerates using AI to manipulate public discourse. The Davidson resources allowed us to challenge these systems directly. We funded legal battles against patent trolls, supported open-source movements in developing nations, and created technological countermeasures to protect intellectual property from theft. 5 years into this work, I received a call from the Nobel Committee. "Ms. Martinez, we'd like to discuss your nomination for the Peace Prize. Your work in global technology ethics and your transformation of corporate practices through Cortec and now the Technology Ethics Initiative has created a new paradigm for how innovation serves humanity." The nomination felt surreal, a lifetime that began with being demoted for protecting my work, culminating in recognition for ensuring others could do the same. On the day the Nobel announcement was expected, I gathered with former colleagues and family at Cortec's original headquarters, now preserved as a historical site. The cubicle where my journey truly began had become a monument to persistence. My phone buzzed. The Norwegian number displayed made everything real. After the call, I turned to face the room. Destiny Williams, Maria Rodriguez. Even William Davidson's old business rival, now a collaborator, was present. In the back row, I spotted Veronica Davidson, who'd quietly attended every major milestone over the past years. "I've been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize," I announced softly. The citation specifically mentions Cortec's model for ethical technology development and the work of the Global Technology Ethics Initiative. Applause filled the room, but I continued speaking. 25. Years ago, someone tried to take credit for my work. Instead of destroying my career, that action set in motion changes that transformed how technology serves humanity. The real prize wasn't about personal achievement, but about proving that integrity can reshape systems. At the Stockholm ceremony, months later, I delivered a speech that synthesized our journey. Innovation without ethics is merely a temporary advantage. Technology without conscience is potential tragedy. But when brilliant minds commit to serving humanity's highest good, when corporations choose purpose over pure profit, when governments prioritize citizens over control, then we see what's truly possible. I paused, seeing Veronica in the audience with tears streaming down her face. To anyone watching who has had their work stolen, their trust betrayed, their dreams temporarily derailed, know that your greatest contribution may come not from the original vision, but from how you respond to its violation. Sometimes the universe asks us to build beyond ourselves by first asking us to overcome what would diminish us. The Nobel ceremony itself felt like a dream. But the conversation afterward with young innovators from around the world, bright minds asking how to maintain integrity in competitive environments, felt essential. Months later, back in California, I found myself once again in deep conversation with Veronica Davidson. She'd continued her work in criminal justice reform, applying technology to break cycles of recidivism that her father's business practices had often contributed to. "You know," she said over coffee at a quiet Berkeley cafe, "I spent years thinking you were my opposite, virtuous where I was calculating, principled where I cut corners. But I finally understand. You didn't start out that way." I nodded. Integrity isn't inherited or automatic. It's developed through difficulty, strengthened by deciding, repeatedly, to choose long-term good over short-term gain. "That first time I took credit for your work, what was really going through your mind?" I smiled at the memory. Honestly, rage, disbelief, fear that it would happen again. But then something shifted. I realized that if I spent all my energy fighting the injustice backward, I'd never have energy to create something better forward. Leaned forward. "That's what changed everything, isn't it? Not just for you, but for everyone you influenced." Perhaps. Or perhaps we all just grew tired of a world where the brightest minds spent half their energy protecting their ideas from the very people who should be collaborating with them. The conversation stretched into the afternoon as we mapped out new collaborations. Her foundation would fund the next generation of ethical technologists. Our initiative would ensure they had legal protection to innovate without fear. 6 months. Later, at a joint press conference announcing these partnerships, a young journalist asked the question that seemed to capture our entire journey. "Ms. Martinez, Ms. Davidson, how do you explain going from perfect enemies to collaborative partners?" I looked at Veronica, who nodded for me to answer. "Because we finally learned what technology keeps trying to teach us. Our greatest advances come not from individuals competing, but from collective creating. The best response to having something stolen isn't revenge. It's building something too valuable to be owned by any single person." Veronica added, 25 years ago, we both operated from a scarcity mentality, believing success meant taking from others. Technology taught us about abundance, that creating open systems multiplies possibility rather than dividing it. As we fielded more questions, I reflected on the extraordinary arc of our story. From that first theft in 2019 to standing together as Nobel laureate and reformed corporate leader, championing the very values we'd once violated. That evening, as I reviewed my calendar for the coming year, I noted an entry that made me smile. Visit Lagos Innovation Hub, 10-year anniversary celebration. The center that had begun as our response to technological colonialism had evolved into Africa's leading AI research facility. Ibrahim Suleiman, the teenager who'd helped expose MedPower's exploitation, now led their quantum computing division. The circular nature of everything felt complete, yet infinitely ongoing. Every problem solved revealed deeper challenges. Every breakthrough created new responsibilities. Every generation would face its own tests of choosing integrity over expedience. Later, that night, I opened the wooden box containing my Nobel medal. Beside it lay the original Project Phoenix code, those first few lines that had started everything. Above them both, I placed a new addition, a photograph from the Davidson Foundation ceremony showing former enemies united in purpose. The next morning brought the annual Cortech Genesis Symposium, where we celebrated the anniversary of my demotion with keynote speakers and panel discussions about ethical technology. This year's theme, From Cubicle to Nobel, How Betrayal Became. Blueprint. As I prepared my opening remarks, I considered what story best captured our journey. Not the technical details of Project Phoenix, not the corporate intrigue, not even the international impact of our work. The real story was simpler. Sometimes, the universe places us exactly where we need to be by appearing to put us where we least want to be. Sometimes our greatest teachers arrive disguised as our worst adversaries. And sometimes the most profound victories come not from defeating our enemies, but from transforming them into allies. Standing at the podium where I'd once defended stolen credit, I began. 26 years ago, in a cubicle on the third floor of this building, corporate theft sparked a revolution in ethical technology. Today, I stand here not to relive old grievances, but to illustrate a truth technology keeps teaching us. The best code is open source, the best innovations are collaborative, and the best revenge is building something so good that stealing it becomes impossible. The audience, a mix of former colleagues, current innovators, and future leaders, listened intently as I continued. We've proven that doing the right thing isn't just morally satisfying, it's strategically superior. That integrity scales better than deception. That collaborative competition creates more value than zero-sum rivalry. In the front row, Destiny Williams nodded encouragement beside Veronica Davidson. Maria Rodriguez took notes as diligently as she had when first joining our team. Henry Liu, now serving as an elder statesman of ethical business, smiled with evident pride. To the next generation of innovators, I concluded, your work will be stolen. Your ideas will be challenged. Your integrity will be tested. But remember this, every betrayal is a crossroads. You can spend your life fixated on what was taken, or you can use that energy to create something better than what was stolen. Choose creation. Choose collaboration. Choose to build a future where your children won't need to fight the battles that defined our generation. The speech ended with sustained applause. Afterward, during the networking session, a young engineer from Tanzania approached me. She'd participated in our African Innovation Exchange program, developing solar-powered medical devices for rural clinics. Ms. Martinez, she said, holding my hand firmly, I read about your story in engineering school, how you chose to build instead of battle. It inspired me to keep coding when professors said girls shouldn't pursue technology. Now I'm developing solutions for my community. Thank you for proving that integrity multiplies impact. Conversations like these multiplied throughout the day. Each new innovator carried forward not just technical knowledge, but the conviction that technology's highest purpose was service, not dominance. As evening approached, Veronica found me on the building's rooftop garden, where employees often took breaks to think clearly. The San Francisco sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and purple. Rachel, she began, I've been waiting for the right moment to tell you something. When my father died, he left me a letter. In it, he wrote that watching you transform his greatest failure, the culture of theft he created, into a global movement for ethical innovation, was his life's most unexpected gift. She paused, looking out over the city. He asked me to tell you that your choosing grace over grievance taught him more about true leadership than anything else in his corporate career. I absorbed this, thinking of all the complex emotions our journey had navigated. It's strange to find peace through purpose rather than revenge. Perhaps that's the universe's greatest lesson, Veronica suggested, that our deepest healing comes from transforming our wounds into wisdom that benefits others. We stood in comfortable silence as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. 26 years of intertwined destinies, from theft to trust, from competition to collaboration, from betrayal to breakthrough. The next generation of Phoenix protocols was already in development, pushing boundaries of what medical AI could achieve. But more importantly, the ethical frameworks we'd established were being adopted across industries. Corporations worldwide implemented Davidson protocols, requiring transparency, protecting whistleblowers, and mandating ethical impact assessments. As I prepared to leave the office that night, I paused at my desk to read through congratulatory messages from around the world. Letters from patients whose lives Phoenix had saved. Notes from companies that had implemented our ethical business models. Messages from students inspired to pursue technology for good rather than gain. But one message stood out, from Ibrahim Suleiman in Lagos. Dr. Martinez, today marks exactly 20 years since you chose to protect Phoenix instead of fight its theft. That choice rippled across oceans. Our lab now develops solutions that will save thousands of lives. Thank you for teaching us that building with integrity travels further than taking advantage. The Phoenix truly rises when lifted by many wings, not stolen by one. I smiled, printing the message to add to my collection of reminders about why the difficult path remained the right path. Walking to my car that night, I made one last stop at the preserved cubicle where this journey began. A plaque now commemorates The Space Where Ethics Met Innovation, 2019. Visitors often left notes here, sharing their own stories of choosing integrity over expedience. Today's note, written in careful handwriting, read, "I was demoted yesterday for refusing to falsify test results. Reading your story gives me hope. If betrayal can become a breakthrough for you, maybe it can for me too." I took a photo of the note to respond to later, understanding perfectly that mixture of rage and fear, yet seeing now how it could transform into resolve and purpose. Driving home through familiar San Francisco streets, I reflected on how a stolen project had catalyzed a global movement, how corporate betrayal had birthed international collaboration, how personal grief had grown into collective healing. The CEO's daughter who tried to take everything had ultimately given everyone something priceless, proof that integrity, persistence, and purpose could overcome the most sophisticated systems of exploitation. 26 years later, the lesson remained achingly simple yet infinitely powerful. We rise highest not by stepping on others, but by lifting everyone around us. Technology's greatest promise wasn't computation, but connection. Innovation's truest purpose wasn't disruption, but improvement. As I pulled into my driveway, the Nobel medal safely at home beside the original Phoenix Code, I felt complete, but not finished. Tomorrow would bring new challenges requiring the same choice: revenge or creation, competition or collaboration, stealing or building. The universe would continue testing humanity's commitment to its highest values. And somewhere, another young's innovator faced their own betrayal, standing at their own crossroads, deciding whether to fight the past or build the future. For them, for all of us, the Phoenix would keep rising, its wings built not of vengeance, but of vision, not of theft, but of trust, not of individual triumph, but of collective transcendence. The story that began with stolen credit had become humanity's shared legacy. A testament to technology's power when guided by conscience, innovation's impact when driven by purpose, and integrity's triumph when tested by betrayal. And in that endless cycle of rising and renewal, each generation would rediscover what our journey proved. Sometimes our greatest gifts arrive wrapped in our worst betrayals. The key is recognizing the gift, unwrapping the lesson, and choosing to use what was meant to diminish us to instead elevate everyone. This was the true meaning of the Phoenix, not just rising from ashes, but transforming destruction into creation, converting personal pain into universal purpose, and proving that in the economy of the soul, what we give freely multiplies faster than what we steal secretly. The moon rose over the bay as I finally headed inside, ready for tomorrow's continuation of the endless work of building a world where brilliant minds could innovate freely, where corporate systems served humanity rather than exploiting it, and where the next generation of leaders would inherit not just advanced technology, but the wisdom to use it well. Because in the end, that was the real inheritance worth protecting. Not patents or profits, but principles. Not algorithms, but ethics. not market dominance, but human dignity. The journey from cubicle to Nobel, from theft to trust, from betrayal to breakthrough, had shown us all what truly matters. And tomorrow, as always, would offer fresh opportunities to choose the harder, better path. The Phoenix was ready to soar again. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.